So thank you, and I will try and not be too repetitive because I know my presentation is going to kind of overlap on a lot of points that were discussed at the panel discussion. I've been asked to talk about alliance models which are enabling Asian and global biopharma companies to deliver sustainable and synergistic growth. And what I'd like to do is really to start by looking at present day's challenges that global pharma is facing. I think we all recognize the fact that growth and profitability are really, really big challenges for global pharma these days, largely because of the impending patent cliff that they face by around 2015, 2016 onwards, which is seeing a lot of their top line and bottom line kind of disappear because of blockbusters losing patent protection. We are also seeing very, very alarming levels of declining R&D productivity. And this, of course, is also a big challenge for global pharma because the regulatory hurdles and expectations are becoming tougher. It's taking longer to get products to the market. So that's a big worry for global pharma. So there's basically a very high level of profit erosion because of many of these factors I just talked about. And adding to that, of course, is government price pressure in many parts of the world. I think you've heard a lot about the European pricing pressure where, countries like Germany are forcing rebates, which are really making global pharma very, very concerned. US is seeing a huge focus on a generics kind of approach to their whole Medicare system. You're seeing, a generics penetration of almost 80% in the US market. You're seeing a lot of reimbursement issues in many parts of the world. Many approved products are not being put onto national formularies, and therefore reimbursement is becoming a big issue in many parts of Europe. Price control is there in many parts of the world, especially in Asian countries. And of course, as I mentioned recently, the concern around compulsory licensing also is a big challenge for many of these companies looking at ways and means of entering new markets. Now, the response of global pharma to all these challenges is really about how do we address growth and profitability by tapping some of these high growth markets. And certainly Asia is certainly a very high growth market opportunity for global pharma. What are global pharma doing now? They're actually doing things which are about pursuing any growth opportunity. And it is about pursuing strategies in addressing profitability. So when you look at growth opportunities and pursuing growth strategies, they're looking at emerging markets, where I mentioned Asia is a very important part of that growth strategy. Biosimilars and generics seem to be also an opportunity being pursued by global pharma. Specialty drugs, orphan drugs, these are kind of new strategies being pursued by global pharma, really to look at, seeing whether they can get high value, high profit kind of businesses going. The acquisition of Genzyme by Sanofi Aventis is one such example. Then you're also seeing a lot of product diversification into diagnostics and devices. You know that Roche has made a big foray into diagnostics and so on and so forth. And apart from that, you're also seeing demerging, like what Abbott is doing, to basically seeing whether they can unlock some growth opportunities from their core businesses and some adding on some non-core business assets to growth strategies. So what is happening today is that there is a strategy of downsizing, divestment, and demerging as a way of addressing this profit and growth problems and challenges that they're facing. We are seeing huge focus on on reducing cost. And therefore, that's where you're seeing a lot of the downsizing taking place, whether it's R&D programs or whether it's reducing the size of their marketing forays. It's a very interesting state of flux that we're seeing in global pharma. Now let's, quickly now look at what's happening in Asia. Asia is doing its own thing, but it's also very, very cognizant of what's happening in terms of the global pharma landscape. So if you look at what's happening in terms of getting its act together, I think Asian companies are beginning to focus on development and manufacturing capabilities. There is global scale infrastructure being built in the manufacturing side of things. You're already seeing that India and China today accounts for over 150 US FDA qualified plants in the small molecule space. So APIs are largely coming from India and China today and helping generics companies really sort of address world markets in a very, very cost-effective way. You're also seeing a very similar kind of, activity taking place in the biologics and biomanufacturing space, where India and China and Korea are beginning to build very strong capabilities in biologics manufacturing. And there's actually, the largest biologics capacity outside the US and Europe are in India and Korea today. And we ourselves are adding another big global scale manufacturing operation in Malaysia. So you can see that there is a lot of activity in biomanufacturing. Now, when you come to markets, obviously these are large growth opportunities. The Chinese market is expected to grow from $40 billion to $100 billion in size by 2015, and the Indian market opportunity likewise is going to grow from $12 to $30 billion in the same period. So these are very attractive market opportunities for companies to pursue and global pharma to pursue, and that's why you're seeing a lot of activity of global pharma getting into these markets. What is also very interesting is the regulatory acceptance for biosimilars and new drugs. In fact, you will see that there are many more biosimilars in Asia than there are in other parts of the world. And very soon, new molecules are also coming into the market, developed in local companies. So I think these are very interesting trends that we must all keep in mind. And then if you look at really the kind of market opportunity in terms of statistics, I think it's very clear that emerging markets have grown, at strong double-digit kind of growth momentum compared to the developed markets, which are really struggling to grow because they're growing at low single-digit numbers. The emerging markets today actually account for almost $200 billion, and this is supposed to almost double to $400 billion by 2015. And also what is important is a lot of the key markets like China, India, and Brazil are actually accounting for 70% of these emerging market opportunities. So, with all these wonderful opportunities, what is the issue? What are the challenges for global pharma to really take a big, size of this pie? The opportunities are very large, but I believe that the challenges are very complex for global pharma to really get into these markets and make a big success of it. To begin with, the market dynamics are very, very different in Asian markets. Pricing points are very, very different. And I think there's a huge challenge for global pharma to look at dual pricing strategies. How do you look at Asia, look at these markets? These are very large markets, but the price of drugs is very, very different in these markets. When you look at market share and market penetration, it's very difficult to get into these markets because they are diverse, they're very fragmented. You've got hundreds of thousands of retail outlets. You've got, very, very complex kind of marketing and distribution networks to deal with. So this is something that global pharma is trying to understand, comprehend, and then find strategies to get into it. As I mentioned earlier, I think IP is a big challenge for global pharma. Across Asia, they're concerned about getting their new products into the markets. Is there going to be, threats to their IP? Is there, the compulsory licensing issue was one such issue that has become a huge problem and concern for big pharma, and that's something which we need to all sort of put our heads together to see how do we overcome these kind of challenges together. Local competition is very strong. There are strong regional brands. These companies have built these markets and therefore they are very well entrenched. It's fiercely competitive. The generics business in Asia is fiercely competitive, low margin businesses. Global pharma is very challenged in terms of how do they build a business model to adapt to these kind of large markets but low margin markets. So basically it's a complex challenge. So what is interesting is that global pharma is now looking at new strategies of really getting a slice of this very big pie. So what are they doing? There are some very interesting emerging trends that I'd just like to, share with you. As I mentioned, local manufacturing in Asia is becoming very key. And I think what global pharma is also doing very intelligently is to say, how do we partner with Asian companies to see if we can actually tap these markets in a more effective way? Most recently, Roche announced a partnership with a company in India called MCure. This is really about, doing some amount of manufacturing in India so that they can actually create new presentations, new kind of product dosage forms, so that they can actually have a different kind of presentation and packaging for the Asian markets, which will be differentiated from their other markets. And you can actually start looking at emerging markets in a very different way and have dual pricing as then an opportunity to start looking at tapping these markets more effectively. Pfizer has done the same with a company in China called Haisun, where Haisun is known to be one of the lowest cost producers of a large number of small molecule generics. And this is an opportunity for Pfizer then to see if they can partner with Haisun and get into the China market more effectively through this kind of partnership. There are a number of marketing partnerships that we are seeing. Big pharma in India is beginning to look at second brand strategies. So you're seeing companies like Novartis partnering with a very strong diabetes company in India called USV, which has a very large marketing reach, and it has given a second brand of its Galvus product. MSD has done the same with Sun Pharma for Januvia. And, this is a second brand strategy. So second brand strategies seem to be a very interesting marketing partnership approach to penetrate and expand the markets through the very strong local entrenched players that have been very successful in these markets. And then you have a large number of global licensing arrangements, such as the one between GSK and Dr. Reddy's for generics, and between Pfizer, Aurobindo, and Strides for generics as well. Now, when it comes to research partnering models, I won't go through all of them, but I think I mentioned that there are many models. You've got research services models where the Merck-WuXi partnership is one such example, and where the BMS Syngene model in India is one such example. You've got co-development partnerships of risk-resource sharing for biosimilars, which is a good example is the Biogen-Samsung partnership and the Biocon-Mylan partnership. And then you've got an outright licensing kind of deal that has been struck between Glenmark and Sanofi. And I think you will see many more of these licensing partnership deals as we go forward. Now, what I'd like to share with you is our own, partnering models, where you can see that on the research services side, we have a very strong partnership with Bristol Myers Squibb, which really is about leveraging the high quality of scientific talent that we have in India, using the kind of low-cost, operating base that we have in India, and then developing new discovery research models where you actually take molecules to the market in a very cost-effective manner. And I think this is a model that BMS is very, very pleased with, because it has helped them to bring many clinical candidates into the clinic in a very short time in a very cost-effective way. The second one is what I mentioned. It's about being a very strong development partner for small biotech companies, Optima Pharma being one such example, which has enabled them to accelerate innovation and take it to the market in a very cost-effective way. And the third is about risk and resource sharing, where I think, again, it impacts the cost of innovation in a very, very positive way. So my concluding remarks are really about what do these partnering opportunities mean for global pharma and for Asian companies. I believe that marketing partnerships will allow faster and greater access and penetration to Asian markets. We are seeing this early signs of this kind of model, but I'm sure you will see many more such models panning out in future. This is a win-win for both companies. To me, partnered R&D is about shared IP. And I think it is this shared IP that will actually create a strong IP culture in Asia. And it is a win-win then, because I think Asian companies will start really protecting IP in a very strong way. And that's what will then absolutely move away this whole perception hurdle that IP plays in Asian markets. To me, sharing of IP is extremely important, and therefore shared research is extremely important when it comes to co-development of new products. And I think we are seeing this happen in many of our programs. I think an outstanding example is the one that we're developing with our friends in San Diego, Amelin. And there again, I think we are seeing a lot of shared IP and a very, very strong IP culture developing within our own organization. So marketing and research partnerships, I believe, will address growth, profitability, and research productivity, and I believe will address the cost of innovation. And finally, I believe that this partnering between global and Asian pharma companies, I think, will lead to uniformity in drug pricing in the long term on the back of very strong IP protection. And I hope it will in some way lead to global harmonization. So that to me is really my sort of way I see the whole partnering model between Asia and global pharma happening, which to me is really the way forward in terms of both affordable innovation and about high-value IP creation across the board. Thank you very much.